Today, we're looking at some of the darkest and most disturbing theories about the Fallout 4 universe. The Vault caused the war. Many question Vault-Tec's rapid and seemingly perfect rise to success, even before the Great War. From a small company that came out of nowhere to a powerful multinational corporation with billion-dollar contracts with the United States. A remarkable, extraordinary rise. Probably too remarkable. As if there was a perfectly devised plan behind it, so that everything fell into place in a precise domino effect. Let's consider a few facts. No one in the world benefited from the nuclear threat as much as Vault-Tec. Once agreements were reached with the government, the company not only gained access to a scandalous amount of public funds to finance the Vault construction project, equally, if not more, important was the permission to use a huge number of state patents from a wide range of fields, from defense projects to chemistry, from engineering to weapons, a wealth of valuable information that would soon become the essential basis for all shelter structures. The resulting technological advancement was extreme, allowing Vault-Tec to complete many of its projects and acquire scientific and military potential unlike anything else on the planet. In fact, many of the bizarre and extraordinary devices found in the modern world of Fallout have their roots in this unusual collaboration. So the logical consequence is quite simple. If the advantages were so obvious, why not step on the gas? Why not go further and see how much wealth, power, and control we can acquire? The war for resources, the crisis with China, and the long-standing threat of Holocaust. Everything seemed to conspire in favor of Vault-Tec. So would it be so absurd to think that the company was directly involved in this escalation? A cold, calculating hand, pressing the right buttons to lead the world to the brink of the abyss, and even giving it the final push, in the name of a ravenous quest for power, and who knows what other dark ends. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this video so far, make sure to subscribe. Okay, back to the video. The teddy bears hidden by the Institute. When traveling around the Commonwealth, you may encounter many seemingly meaningless oddities along the way. One of the most famous are teddy bears, placed in the most unimaginable places. These stuffed animals are often arranged to form curious representations, chess games, surgical operations, positioned at the wheel of vehicles. Each time, the situations are different, sometimes funny, sometimes disturbing. But what is the real reason? What is behind these scenes? Is there a mysterious hand that has dotted the map with these strange bears? The most common theory points to the Institute as the author of this latest anomaly. According to this reasoning, the stuffed animals could serve a dual purpose in the hands of the organization. The first would be as an emotional experiment. The sudden sight of the scene in contrast to the surrounding environment could be specifically designed to elicit a reaction in the viewer. It is difficult to say what the goal of such a test is, but it could probably be a way to collect data on the mental behavior of random subjects. After all, such experiments are not new to the Institute's projects. However, the second reason is the most popular, namely the use of teddy bears as a means of espionage. Seemingly harmless and ignorable, they would be ideal locations for micro cameras and transceivers. Probably just one of the many types of eyes deployed by the Institute across the United States, but perfect for placement even in the most remote and hidden places, without causing any suspicion among the inhabitants of the area. In this way, the group would observe the evolution of the Commonwealth from its secret base, gathering information and pondering its next moves. Who is the mysterious stranger? In the Fallout series, players often have the opportunity to unlock a skill called Mysterious Stranger. Once obtained, every time the character uses VATS to aim, there is a small chance that the eponymous character will appear out of nowhere to temporarily assist in combat, inflict damage on the enemy, and then disappear into thin air just as he arrived. There is much speculation about who this character really is. Of course, this is a game mechanic, but in reality, the developers wanted to play around with the mystery surrounding the NPC. His most common representation is that of a man wearing a yellow trench coat, a fedora, and armed with a .44 caliber pistol. He never speaks, has no lines of dialogue, and disappears the moment you exit VATS mode. For a long time, the lack of precise information gave rise to numerous theories, bordering on the absurd, such as that he was some kind of supernatural entity, an immortal spirit tasked with assisting the protagonist on his journey, or even a highly advanced synth from the future, guiding the player's timeline towards the best course. In any case, some facts, albeit vague, can give us clues about the true nature of the stranger. First of all, he is not the only mysterious helper of the player in the Fallout saga, but several figures have taken on the role of occasional rescuer. Many were called the Mysterious Stranger, although their appearance varied from game to game, sometimes even taking on female features. But there were also two specific variants, namely the Mysterious Savior and Miss Fortune. This has given rise to speculation that there is a secret group dedicated to assisting the player in their endeavors, although their motives are not precisely known. We also obtain new information about the character thanks to Nick Valentine, the synth detective we meet in Diamond City, whom we have the opportunity to recruit as a companion. Searching his office, we can find a folder containing the case file on his investigation of the mysterious stranger, which also mentions some appearances from previous games. Furthermore, if we have Nick with us when the character appears, the synth will express his perplexity in a few short lines of dialogue, then reveal his frustration when he sees him disappear before his eyes.
That was him, the stranger. He's right here. Where'd he go?
In fact, many suspect that there is a strong connection between Nick and the stranger. They both wear virtually the same clothing, and the detective's interest seems to conceal a secret connection. Perhaps he could be a second synth based on the same designs as the detective, or there could be an even deeper connection. What if the mysterious stranger is the original human whose memory and personality were cloned and downloaded into Nick's electronic mind? Is Dogmeat a synth? Dogmeat is probably the most iconic companion in the entire Fallout series, so much so that he even appears in the new TV series. And perhaps for this very reason, he has been the subject of particular attention from fans. Many question the peculiar characteristics of the dog, who is undoubtedly a unique creature in the context of the video game. Let's start with the animal's bizarre abilities. In addition to his indisputable fighting ability, Dogmeat demonstrates extraordinary resistance to radiation, easily walking through highly contaminated areas, such as the glowing sea, without apparently suffering any negative effects. This observation is further supported by the fact that he has maintained a normal appearance despite the fact that most other stray dogs have undergone significant mutations in appearance. We must admit that Dogmeat possesses extraordinary intelligence, well above the average for his species. He immediately becomes attached to the protagonist, almost as if he knows precisely what his task is and what the player needs. And he obeys orders easily from the very beginning. Perhaps this is some form of programming? Furthermore, something that may not be known to many players is that if we miss the encounter with Dogmeat at the beginning of the game at the Red Rocket truck stop, we can still get him as a companion during a quest for Nick Valentine. On that occasion, the detective will claim to know someone suitable to help the protagonist and will say that Dogmeat is perfectly capable of distinguishing good people from bad at first glance. This is a remarkable ability for an ordinary dog. His relationship with Nick makes his nature very suspicious. Could it be that, just like the detective, he is a synth in canine form? But in that case, who created him? The Institute? And for what purpose was he programmed? What is Mama Murphy's true identity? Mama Murphy is an NPC we first meet in the town of Quincy. She is an elderly woman with a strong addiction to chems, who claims to possess the sight, or the ability to predict the future. This power is supposedly amplified by the drugs themselves. Whether or not this ability is real is not entirely clear. What is certain is that several of her predictions, however vague and imprecise, seem to come true. But whether this is due to luck, chance, or some knowledge possessed by the woman is impossible to say. But let's assume that these powers are real. Where do they come from? And what is their true nature? There are several possibilities. The most obvious is that her powers are indeed a form of psychic ability. After all, the world of Fallout often suggests the existence of such abilities. But if we look more closely at the game environment, other explanations may be just as likely. Mama Murphy could be a former member of the Institute. This would explain her mysterious knowledge of many of the events in the Commonwealth that she should be unaware of. Her addiction to chems could be a consequence of her guilt over the immoral projects and policies of the organization she collaborated with, which still haunt her today. Others believe that the woman is a former inhabitant of some unknown vault, and that her abilities are a result of mental or genetic experiments carried out on her and her former companions by Vault-Tec. After all, her mental powers are exactly the kind of anomaly that could have been generated by the multinational's extreme experiments. Finally, one last theory claims that she is a synth, and her visions are due to some programming defect or damaged component. This is a very fascinating consideration, as it would tie in with another very famous macro theory in the fandom, but we will discuss that later. Are mannequins alive? And speaking of connections, this theory echoes speculation about the Institute, and teddy bears being used as unsuspected spies for the Commonwealth. In fact, another type of bizarre object is scattered around the map in large numbers: mannequins. They are pretty much everywhere, and, just like the teddy bears, they are often arranged to reproduce strange situations or moments of everyday life. Some have even been found in disturbing situations, such as running towards the player or watching them, half hidden around corners. It is therefore natural to assume, given the profound similarities, that the same hand with the same purposes is behind both the mannequins and the teddy bears, but with one clear difference. While the stuffed animals could be spies positioned to observe the inhabitants of the Commonwealth undisturbed, the mannequins could have an additional function, a dormant army. In fact, the truth could be that many of the mannequins in the world of Fallout are actually androids, robots created before the first synth models, which are currently suspended in standby mode, like vigilant guards waiting for orders. But a single command transmitted to their cybernetic minds would be enough to reactivate them and turn them into lethal machines of destruction. This theory is supported by some unusual findings, such as mannequins whose heads seem to move when the player passes by, while others, damaged, reveal highly advanced mechanical parts under the outer layer of paint. In the Warren Theater, it is possible to find a synth perfectly camouflaged among a group of mannequins. Finally, the most disturbing evidence comes from the Fallout 4 Far Harbor DLC. In the new area, it is possible to find a message floating in the water, right next to a sunken wreck. The message is just an excerpt from a note, probably written by the captain of the ship. In it, the man reported some complaints from the crew, wondering if it was just some strange joke. The complaints concerned the presence of suspicious and continuous noises coming from the hold, which was apparently empty. The only thing present was a large load of mannequins. An underwater civilization. Fallout games often feature the sea. In Fallout 4, the capital wasteland is bordered by the Pacific Ocean and would be largely explorable if it weren't for the high levels of radioactivity in its waters. However, the developers give us the opportunity to investigate the ocean depths thanks to the Aqua Boy Aqua Girl perk, which not only makes us immune to marine contamination, but even allows us to breathe underwater, thus opening up our horizons to a large, unknown, albeit seemingly empty area. But is this really the case? Some players have obviously taken advantage of this opportunity and spent many hours of gameplay venturing into the unexplored depths. They discovered that the developers did not shy away from populating this area with secrets and a few Easter eggs. Hidden from view from the coast are long pipelines that wind their way to the far reaches of the map. Is it possible that such work is just part of the setting? Upon closer inspection, several clues to a possible hidden plot come to light. Perhaps prototypes for parts of the game that were never completed. Sifting through the seabed, you can find many shipwrecks, and inside them, various objects such as loot, skeletons, and even the much-discussed teddy bears. In addition, enemies, even high-level ones, spawn at the water's surface. Why go to the trouble of programming all this for an area that should be almost devoid of interest? Finally, there are two significant elements that point to the possibility that the ocean area is much more alive, and perhaps designed to accommodate more than meets the eye. The first is the sighting of strange structures adjacent to the pipes that appear to emerge from the seabed, in particular, a dome of regular shape and large enough to accommodate a small play area. It could be the skeleton of a never-completed underwater base project, perhaps a vault. In addition, some fans investigating the game code discovered that Bethesda had plans to develop a weapon that would be perfect for the aquatic setting, a harpoon gun that never saw the light of day. Are we really dealing with a series of coincidences? Or was an underwater civilization planned and then abandoned due to development needs? After all, we must not forget that the Enclave had bases scattered far from American soil, often perfectly concealed to ensure their safety in view of the arrival of the new Great War. Fallout and Skyrim share the same narrative universe. This is a very imaginative theory, but also an extremely fascinating one to explore. Currently, both The Elder Scrolls and Fallout are franchises owned by Bethesda, and every now and then the developers have enjoyed inserting a few small Easter eggs, mutual references between the two games. So much so that fans have come up with the extreme idea that the two settings are actually one and the same world, simply divided by a time gap of millennia. But what supports this theory? In reality, there are very few clues, and we rely more on the imagination of the fandom. But let's examine them briefly. As we can see in the Nuka World DLC, glowing ghouls are not only fearsome opponents, but also have a very special power. They are able to resurrect the corpses around them, turning them into feral ghouls ready to fight. But how do they do it? In fact, the world of Fallout is based on science. Science fiction, of course, but science nonetheless. And as such, it has its limits. and what delineates the boundary between life and death should be one of them. So, if science cannot explain this mechanism, it is almost natural to turn to magic, an element that is not totally absent in the post-apocalyptic world. In fact, many believe that these ghouls, thanks to the intense amount of radiation they have been subjected to, have unlocked unexpected necromantic abilities, just like some wizards in the Elder Scrolls setting. The key clue on which fans base their shared lore hypothesis is the discovery of some special plants in the vaults, plants that look very familiar to fans of these two franchises. In fact, they are identical to the famous Nirn plants, collectible in both Skyrim and Oblivion. This is probably just an Easter egg, but if we fantasize a little and take it seriously, the presence of Nirn could give us another interesting revelation. If these plants were created from scratch inside a vault for some mysterious purpose, this means that they could only have spread to the outside world at a later date. This would therefore place the timeline between the two games not with the medieval world of Skyrim coming before the pseudo-futuristic world of Fallout, but exactly the opposite. From this point of view, the already decadent world of Fallout would have progressed towards a regression of society, and over the course of millennia, would have transformed into Nirn, the mortal plane of the Elder Scrolls. What was the New Plague really? The New Plague was an extremely viral and deadly disease that spread throughout the United States before the Great War. Following its first appearance in 2053, it claimed more than 200,000 victims and had 2 further major waves of spread in the following years. The event was so serious that it led the government to implement extreme measures. A strict quarantine was imposed throughout the country, and several emergency programs were implemented to contain the spread of the plague. Given the exceptional nature of the situation, these measures seem reasonable and sensible, but the worst was yet to come. The measures soon became more radical, leading the population into widespread paranoia. The company tasked with developing a cure, Westech, failed in its attempt, and subsequent viral outbreaks led Americans into a state of extreme agitation and stress. It was in this climate that the government took advantage of the situation for its own propaganda, and even to carry out a number of hidden agendas. Let's examine one of the messages found at Robco Industries terminals. Safeguard yourself and your community by knowing how to identify a person suffering from the new plague. Common symptoms include profuse sweating, unexplained contusions, which are swelling, massive external hemorrhaging, new ideals, such as socialism, undoubtedly a rather unusual symptom for a disease. What lies behind it is quite obvious. The government of the time had to fight against the socialist threat and the tension of the impending conflict with China, and could not afford the spread of radical ideas opposed to its policies. At the time, there were several countermeasures in this regard, and when the new plague spread throughout the nation, the authorities decided to seize the opportunity and exploit it to get rid of unwanted opponents. The sudden emergence of socialist ideas was listed among the symptoms of the disease, and the population was encouraged to report anyone showing signs of it. In a short time, many well-known individuals were accused of being carriers and refusing to undergo treatment. Strategies of forced detention were implemented against them, often causing them to disappear into thin air as victims of the plague. In the wake of this strategy of tension, it is obvious to wonder what else the government might have done in the name of its battle against the internal enemy. The new plague proved to be an unexpected but ideal ally for its purposes, and for as long as it lasted, the government had carte blanche to control its citizens. So it may have been convenient to prolong it beyond its natural limits, making the most of all the positive aspects they were able to achieve. Anyone can be a synth. Let's conclude this video with a theory that, as we anticipated, incorporates parts of many of those we have already discussed. One of the Institute's main projects has always been synths. Research into increasingly advanced and intelligent models has led to the creation of versions that are virtually indistinguishable from ordinary humans, and even more. In fact, they themselves have no idea that they are artificial creatures, and this is where the crux of the matter lies. For who knows how many years, the organization seems to have been carrying out a veritable replacement of the Commonwealth population, kidnapping small groups or individuals from time to time to replace them with artificial synths. These are real sleeper agents, carrying out intensive espionage missions without even being aware of it. Given this fact, the consequence is obvious. As far as we know, anyone in the world of Fallout could be a synth, and neither we nor they would be able to tell. As far as we know, there are only 2 ways to distinguish an artificial human from a real one. One is the Covenant's SAFE test, a 9-question questionnaire that is 75% effective in revealing the true nature of the interviewee. The logic behind this test is unknown, But it seems that the key is the answer given to the fourth question.
Congratulations! Hey, you made it onto a baseball team. Which position do you prefer?
If the answer is catcher, then there is a strong possibility that the interviewee is a synth. Of course, there is also at least a 1 in 4 chance that a normal human being will give the same answer, even if only by mere chance. This is why the test is not completely reliable, quite the contrary. The second way is definitely drastic, but certainly more efficient. In fact, by searching a character's corpse, it is possible to find cybernetic parts that would reveal them to be artificial. But obviously this requires the death of the suspect and is therefore not always applicable. In light of this, it is clear that in the world of Fallout, it is currently impossible to say with certainty who is a synth and who is not. This has led to a series of chain theories involving all the characters in the series. In fact, we cannot really trust anyone because no one can trust themselves, not just Dogmeat, Mama Murphy, and the mysterious stranger. Anyone could potentially be a sleeper spy. In the Covenant, the population is well aware of this possibility. They have even chosen to create a mini-society that is almost isolationist in order to feel a little safer against this threat. Seen from this perspective, the entire Commonwealth becomes a giant experiment, a house of mirrors where it is impossible to tell what is real and what is not. And the illusion is so closely linked to reality that distinguishing between them becomes almost irrelevant. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on screen now.